That was the first sound that ripped through the velvet-draped dining hall of Le Jardin Rouge, the most expensive French restaurant in the city. The scream wasn't from the waitress, it was from a guest, startled by the sharp clang of a silver tray crash into the marble floor. Crystal glasses shattered, red wine bled across the tiles like spilled blood, and the air filled with the metallic tang of broken glass mixed with the heavy perfume of roasted duck and truffle butter. At the center of it all stood Sandra, a young black waitress, her hands trembling as she tried to steady herself. And across from her, towering in his tailored navy suit, was Charles Duval, the CEO of a global tech empire. His face twisted into a cruel smirk as he leaned back in his chair, speaking in rapid-fire French to the table of executives beside him. Regardez-la, une idiote maladroite. Même servir un verre, c'est trop pour elle. Look at her, a clumsy idiot. Even serving a glass is too much for her. The men at the table chuckled, their laughter low and poisonous. They thought they were safe behind the shield of a foreign tongue. They thought the waitress couldn't understand. But Sandra's eyes narrowed, her chest rose and fell. And then, seconds later, she opened her mouth. Her reply in flawless Parisian French cut through the laughter like a blade. Mieux vaut être une serveuse maladroite qu'un homme riche sans honneur. Better to be a clumsy waitress than a rich man without honor. The room went silent. Forks froze midair. The CEO's smirk collapsed into stunned disbelief. And that's where it all began. To understand how we got here, you need to know Sandra. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a fighter, a dreamer, and someone who had already survived storms most people couldn't imagine. Sandra had grown up in Lagos, Nigeria, in a family that believed in education above all else. Her mother was a French teacher, her father a mechanic. When Sandra was 12, her mother would sit with her every night reading aloud from Les Miserables and Le Petit Prince. By the time she was 15, Sandra spoke French more fluently than most Parisians, but life had a way of testing her. Her father died suddenly, and her family's finances collapsed. Sandra left for the city, taking whatever work she could find. She dreamed of becoming a translator, maybe even a diplomat one day. But for now, she wore the crisp black uniform of Le Jardin Rouge, carrying trays heavier than her own hopes. That night, the restaurant buzzed with energy. A major deal was being celebrated. Charles Duval had flown in with his entourage of executives. The staff whispered about him in the kitchen, the billionaire with the sharp tongue, the man who could make or break careers with a single word. Sandra didn't care about his money. She cared about doing her job well. But fate had other plans. The evening began smoothly. Sandra moved like water between tables, bouncing plates of foie gras and bowls of bouillabaisse. She smiled politely, though her feet ached and her back screamed. At table 7, Charles Duval held court. His voice carried across the room, deep and commanding. He spoke in English when addressing the staff, but when he turned to his colleagues, he slipped into French. Fast, mocking, and sharp-edged. Sandra noticed the way he looked at people, not with kindness, not even with curiosity, but with the cold detachment of someone measuring their worth in dollars. When she approached with a tray of wine glasses, her hand shook slightly. Not from fear, she wasn't afraid of him, but from exhaustion. The tray tilted, and in an instant, one glass toppled, shattering on the floor. The room gasped, and that's when Charles leaned back, smirked, and delivered his cruel line in French. The laughter from his table was like nails on a chalkboard. Sandra's ears burned. She could have stayed silent. She could have bowed her head, apologized, and walked away. That's what most waitresses would have done. But Sandra wasn't most waitresses. She straightened her back, her eyes locking on Charles, and in perfect French, clear, sharp, and undeniable, she delivered her reply. Mieux vaut être une serveuse maladroite qu'un homme riche sans honneur. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. The executives stopped laughing. One of them coughed nervously. A woman at a nearby table whispered, "Did she just—" Charles's face drained of color. He hadn't expected her to understand. He certainly hadn't expected her to fight back. For a moment, the mighty CEO was speechless. The silence stretched. Sandra's heart pounded in her chest. She wondered if she had just destroyed her job, maybe even her future, but she didn't regret it. Charles finally leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You speak French?" he asked in English, his voice low and dangerous. Sandra didn't flinch. "Better than you," she said softly. The room erupted in whispers. Something had shifted, the power dynamic had cracked, and everyone could feel it. Charles's hand slammed against the table, rattling the silverware. He stood towering over Sandra, his jaw clenched. "You think you can embarrass me in front of my colleagues?" he hissed. The restaurant manager rushed forward, panic in his eyes. "Please, sir, let's calm down." But Charles wasn't calming down. His pride had been wounded, and men like him didn't forgive easily. He leaned closer to Sandra, his voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this." And then, before anyone could react, he reached for the glass of red wine in front of him. The question wasn't if he would do something reckless. The question was what? If you were in this moment, what would you do? Would you stay, fight back, or run away? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss stories this wild. Now, let's get back to what happened next. That was the sound everyone expected when Charles Duval's hand gripped the stem of the wine glass. The tension was so thick you could almost taste it, like copper on the tongue, like the moment before lightning strikes. But instead of throwing it, Charles lifted the glass slowly, deliberately, and swirled the wine. His eyes never left Sandra's face. The crimson liquid caught the chandelier light, glowing like blood in a chalice. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. Sandra didn't answer. "It's a Chateau Margaux, 1983, worth more than your entire year's salary." He leaned closer, his breath hot with arrogance. "And yet, in one clumsy move, you almost destroyed it." The executives chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. The restaurant manager wrung his hands, whispering apologies. But Sandra stood tall, her voice was steady. "Wine can be replaced, respect cannot." The words sliced through the air. Charles's smirk faltered. For the second time that night, she had caught him off guard. Earlier that evening, Sandra had taken a moment in the staff locker room, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. She whispered to herself in French, a habit she'd picked up from her mother. "Tiens bon, ma fille. Tiens bon. Hold on, my daughter. Hold on." She knew nights like this were dangerous. The wealthy men who dined at Le Jardin Rouge weren't just customers. They were predators in suits, testing boundaries with every word, every look. But she also knew something else. She was stronger than they realized. Charles set the glass down with a sharp clink. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "You think you're clever," he said, "but cleverness doesn't pay bills. Obedience does." The words stung, not because they were true, but because they revealed exactly how he saw her, not as a person, but as a servant. Sandra's hands trembled at her sides, but she refused to look away. "Obedience may pay bills," she said softly, "but dignity feeds the soul." The room gasped again. One of the executives muttered, "She's going to get fired." But another voice, this time from a nearby table, spoke up. A woman in a red dress, a lawyer Sandra recognized as a regular, leaned forward. "She's right," the woman said. "You crossed a line, Charles." The balance of power shifted again. Charles's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a waitress. He leaned forward, lowering his voice so only Sandra could hear. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he whispered in French. "I could destroy you with a phone call." Sandra's pulse quickened, but she remembered her mother's voice, steady and calm. "Tiens bon." She leaned in just enough for him to hear her reply. "Et moi, je peux vous détruire avec une seule vérité." "And I can destroy you with a single truth." Charles froze, because in that moment he realized something. She wasn't bluffing. The restaurant fell into an uneasy quiet. The clinking of cutlery had stopped. Even the pianist in the corner had faltered, his fingers hovering above the keys. Everyone was waiting. Charles's face darkened. He forced a laugh, trying to shake off the tension. "You see, this is what happens when you give people too much confidence." But his laugh didn't land. It sounded hollow, brittle. Sandra, meanwhile, stood straighter than ever. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was defending every waitress, every worker who had ever been humiliated by men like him. And then it happened. One of the executives at Charles's table, an older man with silver hair, set down his fork. He looked at Sandra, then at Charles. "In all my years," he said slowly, "I've never seen anyone speak to you like that, Charles. And frankly, I think she's right." The table went silent. Charles's head snapped toward him. "What did you say?" The man didn't flinch. "I said she's right. You've built an empire, yes, but somewhere along the way you forgot what respect means." Gas rippled through the room. For the first time, Charles wasn't just facing a waitress. He was facing dissent from his own circle. Charles's face twisted with rage. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "You think you can humiliate me?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the restaurant. "All of you?" The manager rushed forward again, pleading, "Please, sir, let's not—" But Charles wasn't listening. His pride had snapped. He grabbed the bottle of Chateau Margaux from the table, lifted it high above his head, and in that split second, everyone wondered, was he about to smash it on the floor or on someone's skull? What would you do if you were standing there watching this unfold? Would you step in, stay silent, or call for help? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the shocking finale. Now, let's see what happened next. That's what Charles Duval's pride felt like as he stood there, bottle of Chateau Margaux raised high above his head. His face was red, his jaw clenched, his eyes wild. The dining hall of Le Jardin Rouge had gone deathly quiet, every guest frozen in their seats. The bottle trembled in his grip. For a moment, it looked like he might smash it across the marble floor. But then his gaze flicked back to Sandra, and something darker crossed his face. He wasn't aiming for the floor. He was aiming for her. Gasps rippled through the room. The manager shouted, "Monsieur, please," and lunged forward. But Charles was faster. The bottle swung down and stopped inches from Sandra's head. Wine exploded across the floor as the bottle shattered against the corner of the table instead. Red liquid splashed up her uniform, staining it like blood. Shards of glass skittered across the tiles. The room screamed. Sandra didn't flinch. She stood rooted to the ground, her chest heaving, her eyes locked on Charles. "You think this makes you powerful," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "It only shows how weak you are." The words hit him harder than any blow. The executives at his table recoiled. The woman in the red dress stood up. Even the pianist, who had been frozen in fear, slammed his hands down on the keys, producing a discordant crash that echoed like thunder. Charles's empire of intimidation was crumbling in real time. Sandra remembered her mother's words, spoken years ago when she was just a girl. "Le vrai pouvoir, ma fille, ce n'est pas de faire peur, c'est de dire la vérité quand tout le monde se tait." Real power, my daughter, is not in making people afraid. It's in speaking the truth when everyone else stays silent. And now, standing in the most expensive restaurant in the city, facing down one of the richest men in the world, Sandra finally understood. Before Charles could speak, the silver-haired executive rose to his feet. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of authority. "Charles," he said, "you've embarrassed yourself. You've embarrassed this company, and you've embarrassed every one of us sitting here." Charles spun toward him. "You dare—" "Yes," the man interrupted. "I dare, because someone has to." He turned to Sandra. "Young lady, you have more dignity in your little finger than this man has in his entire fortune." The room erupted in murmurs of agreement. And then, like dominoes falling, other voices joined in. "She's right. He went too far. This is unacceptable." The tide had turned. Charles's face twisted with rage. He opened his mouth to shout, but no words came. For the first time in his career, he was truly speechless. Sandra stepped closer, her voice steady and clear. "Vous m'avez sous-estimé parce que je suis une femme noire, mais ce soir, tout le monde voit qui vous êtes vraiment." You underestimated me because I am a black woman, but tonight everyone sees who you really are. The silence that followed was deafening. Charles's hand shook. His empire, his reputation, his carefully constructed mask. It was all unraveling in front of strangers, colleagues, and witnesses who would never forget this night. Security arrived. The manager, pale and trembling, whispered urgently to them. Charles tried to protest, but his words slurred into incoherence. The bottle of wine had been his last weapon, and now even that was gone. They escorted him out, his expensive shoes squeaking on the marble floor. He looked smaller than he ever had before. Sandra stood in the center of the chaos, her uniform soaked in red wine, her hands trembling. But her eyes were steady. The woman in the red dress approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You were brave," she said softly. "Braver than most of us." Sandra nodded, though her throat was tight. She didn't feel brave. She felt exhausted. But she knew one thing. She had spoken the truth, and the truth had power. The story spread like wildfire. Guests whispered, staff repeated it, and within days, the incident at Le Jardin Rouge was everywhere, on social media, in newspapers, in boardrooms. Charles Duval, the untouchable CEO, had been brought down not by a rival company, not by a scandal in the press, but by a waitress who refused to be humiliated. And Sandra? She didn't just keep her job. She was offered a new one by the silver-haired executive himself. "Come work for me," he said. "Not as a waitress, as a translator. I think the world needs to hear your voice." Sandra smiled, tears stinging her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders. Her mother had been right. Real power wasn't in fear. It was in truth. And that night, in a restaurant filled with broken glass and spilled wine, truth had won. If you followed this story all the way through, tell me, what part hit you the hardest? Was it her first reply, the moment she stood tall in silence, or the devastating finale when the CEO was dragged out? Share your thoughts below, and if you want more stories like this, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned.